Welcome to Senate Spotlight, a show that takes a closer look at the Hawaii State Senate. Today we are joined by Senator Glenn Wakai, who represents part of Kalihi all the way to Aiea. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to be here. And don't forget Salt Lake, because I call that the oasis of Honolulu. So that's my district.
So, Senator, tell our viewers a little about your background. You were in television reporting before you traded in your microphone for public service, right?
Yep. I traded microphones from the TV microphone to one on the floor of the House and then Senate. So I've been in politics for 10 years, 8 years in the House and the last 2 years in the Senate. But yes, prior to that, I worked in television news, in fact, with you at KHON and then KHNL. And I always thought that, you know, news is the best precursor to a life in politics, because in news you have the analogy is you're a mile wide and an inch thick, right? On TV, you have a minute and a half to tell a story, versus here, you have to be a mile wide and about 10 feet deep. So it's the news business has prepared me well for life in politics, because you got to be able to digest a lot of information quickly, be able to converse with the public, and convey your vision clearly to the public. So I think it's a really good foundation for a life in news, a life in politics after news.
It definitely is, because you have to really be able to understand complex issues and then be able to communicate that to your constituents, right?
Right. You got to just distill it quickly and spit it out so that people can understand. Because a lot of times, so much of government is jargon and so many numbers and volumes and reams of paper, and you got to kind of distill it quickly, process it in your mind, and then convey that to the public as to, you know, this education funding is necessary because it will do these things. But you have to be able to digest a lot of information to be able to be credible in telling the public how things are going to get better and sometimes how things are not going to get better.
And also to break down the information so that the public can understand it on how it impacts their lives, right?
Yep. Got to dumb it down, just like in the news, so people can understand it.
Intelligent it up, right? Not
yes.
dumb it down.
Intelligent up. I mean, but you come in here, and the beauty of the legislative process is you get a master's degree in everything. But the reality is we're not all experts. I don't know how to lay the asphalt on the ground. I rely on someone from the Department of Transportation to kind of explain that to me. But when I go to the community, I can't talk about all the 7 layers of asphalt that leads to the surface. I've got to kind of just give it to them in bites and chunks that they can understand. So it's dumbing it down and then lifting it up to raise awareness about issues.
So now you're serving, you're going into your 2nd year as senator now.
Yes, love
it. And you've come up with a plan to help our economy and stimulate it. You want to talk about a little bit about that?
Yep. I call it the Wakai 4A economic plan. In most cases, making A is a bad thing. In this case, I think these 4 A's are going to be key to economic development. And I'm a real fan of economic development, because before we can improve healthcare, before we can improve the education system, before we can have better roads, we got to have the resources to do all of those things. And it all starts with the economy, and how are we going to provide a robust economy, provide the needed government service to the people, because everything has a price tag. So the Wakai 4A economic plan, it includes Aloha Stadium and the redevelopment there, aerospace, aquaculture, and alternative energy. Oftentimes here in Hawaii, we talk about how our location is to our detriment, where the shipping costs are so high, and oh, you know, the price of paradise. I can't stand when people talk about the price of paradise. It should be the price of profit, and figuring out how in the world does our location go from being a detriment to an asset. So in 3 of those areas, we'll take the Aloha Stadium out of the picture for now. You look at aerospace, our proximity to the equator. You look at the lava terrain on the Big Island. You look at the fact that we have the best set of telescopes on the planet. We should really be cultivating a robust aerospace industry here in Hawaii. That's a strategic advantage. You look at alternative energy. We talk about wind, rain, waves, solar, geothermal. I mean, there are a whole myriad of options that are out there. Because why? Because of our strategic location, right? You can't replicate that in Nebraska, where they don't have ocean technology, they don't have geothermal, they don't have sun. So we really need to take advantage of our location in that area as well. And you look at aquaculture. Did you know that we import 70% of the fish we eat? How in the world can that be a fact in an island state? I mean, you go back to Nebraska, where they have they're the meat capital of America. Do you think they import any cows into Nebraska? I highly doubt it. So how in the world is it that in Hawaii, an island state, we're importing 70% of the fish we consume? We need to change that dynamic. And again, look at our location as a strategic advantage and really grow aquaculture. Our history is with agriculture, right? But you see in the modern day with issues of agricultural land, commercial development, residential development, there's always going to be a conflict there with our finite land and terrestrial resources. But we have infinite marine resources, which we've kind of haven't paid attention to for a long time. So those are the three of the A's that really focus on our strategic location as an economic asset. That other A is about Aloha Stadium. And you know, Aloha Stadium, in my opinion, should be more than just a place to hold 7 UH football games and a smattering of high school football games and a swap meet. I mean, you look at that asset there, 109 acres, 95% of the time, that's just sitting there to no benefit of the public. And you know, when you talk about rail and its future in Hawaii, they're looking at their Aloha Stadium rail stop as simply a park and ride. Wouldn't it be better if it was a destination that we have whatever the community wants? This is going to be driven by the community, not by Senator Wakai's ideas, but what the community wants. But some of the ideas that are being thrown around are retail, housing, business development, entertainment plaza, all kinds of racing or whatever. I mean, just a whole bunch of ideas should be thrown into the pot for us to discuss to see economic opportunities at the Aloha Stadium site rather than just 100 acres of asphalt that does very little for the public good outside of football season.
So you've tossed out that idea about Aloha Stadium and the redevelopment. Mm-hmm. What has been the public perception on it? Good, bad?
I would say it's 95% good. The 5% who are detractors are the troublesome folks in any political issue. Right? Whatever ideas we gurgle up here never has 100% unanimous support. So the small minority of people who have expressed dissatisfaction or opposition, I should say, to the Aloha Stadium redevelopment idea are those who say, Glenn, I pay $5 for parking. It's already hard enough for me to get parking. Don't do anything that's going to mess that up. I don't care what else goes on there. I want to pay $5 and I want to be able to be within, what, a quarter mile of the stadium and go to my seats. You know, that's, in my opinion, very small-minded because you're only going to be there for a few hours, 7 times a year. What about the rest of the time when we could do something else? And that's not to say that we can't build a parking structure, right? So people just, you know, you shake things up for their first instinctive reaction for some, not everybody, is, oh, no, we can't do this because I want $5 parking near the stadium. It's like, you know, we can build a parking structure to allay your hesitation, and then we can build all these other things. We could build a really entertainment plaza, business opportunities, a hotel, who knows, whatever could be there. But it could be really much more. And rather than saying why it can't be done, let's try and figure out how it can be done, because I think we all want to see more economic development and see the potential of Aloha Stadium.
I think there's some concern with some development like closer to the stadium, but you're talking about development on the outskirts of the property, right?
Yep, so the actual stadium itself is 16 acres of land, but that asphalt that's all around the stadium is 109 acres. So we have a lot of land there that we could develop, and you know, you see the 50th State Fair there, and you see sometimes there's racing there, but other than that, there's nothing going on the asphalt there. And we could really do something spectacular with that parcel.
Are you looking into doing a study on?
We're going to study. We're going to really try and see what the community wants. And you know, that community is a very receptive community to economic development. You look at the fact that Target went in there, boom, no problems, no rumblings, whatever. All of a sudden, Target wants to go to Kailua, and that entire community is up in arms. And I'm not familiar with all of the issues in that area, but it shows you how in the Salt Lake Stadium area, as long as it's reasonable development, they're going to embrace that. And you look at the ingress and egress off the freeways, that's a really good point. It's not a choke point, it's a really good access ways to get onto and off the freeway. And especially, again, if we're going to have the rail there, we need to make it a destination rather than just simply a park and ride.
And let's talk about a little bit on your your other three A's, the alternative energy you talked about, like wind. What do you think about the opposition to the wind farms developing on the neighbor islands?
I'm okay with wind development there. My problem is the distribution mechanism, right? Because obviously we're developing wind on Lanai and Molokai potentially to feed the monster, which is called Oahu. And to do that, it's going to take $1 billion cable. So right now, the plan is that you and I and all the ratepayers of Hawaii will pay for that cable. And I'm not in favor of that, because if Mr. Murdoch and the big wind on Molokai are going to make hundreds of millions of dollars, they should be on the hook, maybe not for the whole $1 billion, but perhaps a good chunk of that should be paid for by the creators of the source of the energy. Because right now, they want to create all the power, and they want you and I to pay for the distribution of the power. There's something wrong with that business plan. Because if I was going to be making microphones, for example, I'm not going to make the microphones and say, okay, state, you pay for getting this microphone into the Olelo studios at the state capitol if I'm manufacturing it, let's say in California, right? But that's exactly how this system is working, right? If I make the microphone, I should, as a business person, figure out how am I going to get to market, how am I going to sell it in Best Buy, how am I going to sell it at the audiovisual center? But that's not part of the plan, right? Murdoch wants to just build the source, collect all the money, and have somebody else pay for the distribution. There's something wrong with that economic plan.
And what about solar farms or solar energy? What do you think about having more solar farms possibly being developed I guess, throughout the state?
Oh yeah, I mean, every place in our state has great sun, so we should take advantage of that. I'm also a big fan of geothermal, right? Madame Pele has given us a gift. I mean, she's hot all the time, right? 35 years or so of molten lava, and we should look at that as a gift to our community and tap some of that energy usage. And you know, I was talking to the DBED director about green jobs, and he applauds the administration and Hawaii for 11,000 green jobs being created through solar, wind, geothermal, and the like. But we need to take the next step of 11,000 green jobs means what? What's the next step? Shouldn't we use cheaper alternative energy as an enticement for economic development? Up until now, you look at our economic development strategy, it's usually about tax credits, right? Okay, movie guys want this, high-tech guys want a tax credit, right? To me, that's not fair, right? The guy making manapuas, he doesn't have the ability to understand what goes on in the legislative process. He is not getting a tax credit, but he's paying his bills. Wouldn't it be better if we tried to spur economic development through cheaper energy costs, renewable energy costs, and use that instead of tax credits as a motivation for economic development? So I'm trying to push DBED to think outside the box and look at alternative energy as a new tax credit for economic development in the future.
And also a job creator, right?
Oh yeah. It's a huge job creator and opportunity, because also the export value is there too, right? Hawaii, because of all of our wonderful abundant resources in the middle of the Pacific, can fine-tune all of its science and the technology. Some of it is not really commercially viable yet, like ocean thermodynamics, right? Where you bring in cold water, combine it with warm water on the surface, you create steam, and then it turns a turbine, and then you create energy. That is not really ready for commercialization. That might be 10 years down the road. But the fact is, Hawaii is going down that road of doing the science, and when we perfect it, then we have an export product that anywhere that's touched by an ocean can use ocean thermodynamics. And if we can perfect geothermal and solar and perfect all of these rich, abundant resources that we have at our disposal, then it's an export product for us as well, and create even more jobs rather than the direct jobs of creating energy purely for the use of people in Hawaii.
One interesting, one of your points with one of your A's, I thought, was aerospace. Mm-hmm. When people think of aerospace, they think of NASA, they think of Florida, but people don't necessarily think about aerospace and Hawaii. It seems like it's out of this world.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, some people think I'm a space cadet. They say, you know, Glenn, keep your feet on the ground and worry about stuff that's on the ground. It's like, you know, well, if we don't think big, then we're not moving the needle enough here. So I'm all about thinking big and throwing ideas out there. And you look at the #1 capital project that's going on here. We talk so much about $5 billion, $6 billion for rail. That may or may not happen in the near future. The biggest capital project going on right now is $1.2 billion for the 30-meter telescope on Mauna Kea. You hardly hear about that being discussed in the community, but that's a huge amount of money and investment in our community that's popping up right there on the top of Mauna Kea. And you look at the terrain on the Big Island, the most closely resembling the landscape of the moon. NASA has a projection of maybe in the next 20 years putting a colony on the moon. We should be luring NASA to go do some of their testing of personnel and equipment on Pohakaloa or near the Big or on the Big Island there. And you look at going back to rockets, right? We're not going to shoot rockets out of Puna like we had contemplated 20 some odd years ago, but now the technology is such that you can piggyback, kind of like when you see the space shuttle piggybacking on a 747. You shoot a commercial plane into the air, it pulls off this rocket, you go in for suborbital zero gravity experience, and then you come down. And people are willing to pay for that. Maybe you and I don't have the $200,000 to do that, but there are people who have that kind of money, they want that kind of experience. And Hawaii, because of its location so close to the equator, it makes it even more plausible to do that. And plus also, the fact is that if something goes wrong, we have an ocean surrounding us rather than land. So NASA and the FAA are real sticklers. Like if they wanted to do one in New Mexico, right? But you know, New Mexico is landlocked. Things go wrong. I mean, somebody could land up in El Paso and kill a lot of people. Versus here, I mean, heaven forbid, there's something catastrophic that goes on up here. But there isn't that real concern because of the expansiveness of the ocean. So again, our location really should be looked at for advantage in aerospace as well.
But not only that, but aerospace could possibly be a good visitor industry generator.
Oh yeah, I mean there's space tourism that's associated with that sub-zero experience. And wouldn't it be neat to have that next to Aulani by Disneyland? So you create this really kind of neat nexus of flight simulation and like, ooh, everything. That's kind of like sexy, right? Like dazzling, ooh, space and exploration. And we want to, I think, create that creative, visionary, let's just think really, really big and grand. And oh, by the way, there's Mickey Mouse next door, next to that. And I think that's kind of a neat family experience that we can create as well for the ability to help boost tourism in kind of a unique niche market.
It could also be help with education, right? Bringing the whole aerospace experience to the students and making it a whole educational experience, right? Right,
because right now the Eva Elementary has the Challenger program for young kids, elementary, middle school students. They go in there and they have like a real operation. Here's the mission. And it's really good fun for them, right? They have the folks that are in the module and then those that are in mission control and they role play. Wouldn't it be better if we made that even more